When you think of jealousy, the first thing that comes to mind is they're jealous because you're beautiful. They're jealous because you're winning. They're jealous because you have what they want. But that's not always the truth. That version of jealousy, the loud, obvious kind, is the least dangerous one because you can always see that version coming. The jealousy that actually threatens your growth doesn't arrive with an attitude. It arrives because of your courage. The specific courage it takes to step into your authority unapologetically, without asking for anyone's permission, without seeking anyone's validation, without announcing your moves before it's already done. Moving in silence activates something in the people around you that loud movement never does. Because loud movement can be managed. It can be commented on, redirected, dismissed before it lands. But a woman building without asking for approval, that can't be intercepted. And that is exactly what triggers the kind of jealousy I'm speaking about. They're not jealous of you because of what you have. They're jealous because your courage exposes their weakness. And I'm not talking to just anybody here. The woman I'm speaking to, she knows what she wants. She knows what she's building. She knows where she's going. And she moves toward it without asking for anyone's permission. That's not arrogance. That's authority. But this doesn't show up everywhere. You don't experience jealousy with everyone. It shows up selectively. In the specific environments where your growth disrupted something someone else was depending on. At work, you got the project. Move without announcing it. And the circle that was used to knowing your business before you made it responded with exclusion. In the relationship, you started moving in your own direction. They acted unbothered and unfazed, like they don't care what you're building. But behind the scenes, they're snooping and watching your every move. In your inner circle, you shared a win, and before it could land, someone made it about themselves. Your moment got redirected in front of everyone without anyone acknowledging what just happened. None of that is a coincidence. That is what happens when you move without asking for permission, and the people who needed that access realize it's already gone. And the access they lost had a name. Think about what happens when a border opens. Anyone can walk in, no questions asked, no cost at the gate, no documentation required. And people get comfortable with that. They build their routines around it. Your time, accessible. Your energy, accessible. Your direction, your process, your wins. All of it available because the border was open. Now think about what happens when the border closes. Not dramatically, not with a wall, just a checkpoint. And for the first time, entry requires something. And the people who were used to walking in with nothing to declare cannot handle the leverage shift that checkpoint just created. Because entry is no longer free. That is what is happening every time someone responds to your growth with exclusion, with surveillance, with an attempt to redirect your moment. You didn't become a problem. You built the border. And the jealousy, the exclusion, the snooping, the upstaging, that is the response to the checkpoint, not to you. To the fact that access now requires something. At work, the exclusion isn't about your performance. It's about the move you made without telling them. You got the project, move without announcing it, and the circle that was used to knowing your business before you made it closed when they realized the access was already gone. In the relationship, the snooping isn't curiosity, it's surveillance of a border they used to cross without stopping. Your direction became something worth monitoring, the moment their authority stopped being required inside of your movement. In your inner circle, the upstaging isn't accidental. It's a redirection tactic. Your win created a checkpoint that shifted the power inside the room. So they made the moment about themselves before it could fully establish that your territory had expanded. This is not a jealousy problem. This is an imbalanced power dynamic responding to a leverage shift. And once you see it that way, you will stop trying to manage their feelings about the checkpoint they now have to go through. And you start asking a better question. How did they get used to crossing the border without being stopped in the first place? Because the checkpoint wasn't always there. And that's important to understand, because the people responding to it now aren't responding to something you created overnight. They're responding to a border that didn't exist before. And it didn't exist before because you didn't need one. When your borders were open, the access felt natural. You shared freely. You moved openly. You let people know what you were building, because you didn't realize yet how much leverage open access was costing you. That openness wasn't weakness. It was who you were before you understood what open borders actually cost. At work, the first time you tried to bring someone along, shared the vision, pitched the idea, tried to keep them in a loop, you didn't get momentum, you got resistance. That's too much work. They'll never go for that. You're reaching. And you watch the energy you brought get deflated in real time. The second time it happened, you told yourself maybe the timing was off. Maybe you shared too soon. Maybe you needed to wait until things were more solid. But by the time the exclusion started, you hadn't given up on the move. You had just learned that sharing it first gave people authority to place limits on something that had not fully formed yet. So you stopped announcing the direction. And your silence was the first checkpoint they ever felt. In the relationship, the first time you shared a new desire, a new direction, or something you wanted to build, you let them weigh in. And at first, that felt like partnership, like consideration, like keeping them included. But the input wasn't neutral. It came with doubt, questions, subtle redirection. Are you sure? Is that really the right move? That doesn't sound like you. And somewhere in that process, your movement became something they expected to have access to before it happened. So the second time, you hesitated. You shared less, you explained less, you stopped giving the full preview. Not because you were hiding, but because you learned that sharing your direction too early gave them authority to influence it, question it, slow it down before it could take form. And by the time the snooping started, it wasn't curiosity. It was the response to a border they used to cross freely. Your silence became the checkpoint they never expected to meet. In your inner circle, the first time your win shifted the attention towards you, someone redirected it, made a joke, changed the subject, started talking about themselves before your moment could fully land. And at first, you brushed past it, because that's your friend. That's just how they are. You didn't want to make it deeper than it needed to be, so you minimized it. The second time it happened, you noticed it faster. The interruption, the energy shift, the way your moment could never seem to stay centered for too long. And instead of fully sitting in the win, you started minimizing it yourself, making it sound smaller, delivering it casually, softening the excitement before anyone else had the chance to. But by the time the upstaging became obvious, the pattern had already formed. Because your growth was no longer matching the version of you the group had emotionally settled around. And your courage to move past the norm created a comparison they were not prepared to sit with. So the moment your expansion started taking up space, the redirect started too. And that is when the checkpoint formed, because your growth shifted the power inside the room. None of that happened because you lacked value. It happened because your power, your authority, and your leverage were accessible before you understood what the open border was costing you. And the moment you started closing it, started moving without announcing, building without updating, succeeding without seeking approval, the people who had been walking through freely felt the checkpoint for the first time and responded with jealousy. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed what they could have access to. Now I want you to think about the last time your growth shifted the dynamic somewhere. At work, in a relationship, in your inner circle. Someone responded differently the moment you stopped moving the way they were used to. Drop a black heart emoji in the comments down below if you ever realized someone was comfortable with you until your growth required a checkpoint. And here's why that comfort mattered so much to them. Because it wasn't really comfort, it was access. And the question isn't why they responded to the checkpoint. The question is, who was benefiting from the border staying open? Because it isn't you. Think about the workplace where the exclusion started. The circle didn't exclude you because you underperformed. They excluded you because you moved without them. And a group that can't contain your growth will contain your belonging instead. They couldn't stop the project, so they stopped what they controlled. The exclusion keeps the group from having to reckon with the gap your movement created. As long as you're on the outside, the gap doesn't have to be acknowledged. Think about the relationship where the snooping started. Your silence removed something they were used to having, early access to your direction before you committed to it. The snooping is the attempt to restore that access without having to ask for it directly. Because asking would mean acknowledging that the access was never theirs to begin with. Your direction became intelligence the moment you stopped handing it over freely. Think about the inner circle where the upstaging happens. Your win shifted the room. The energy moved towards you. And someone in that circle couldn't sit with what that comparison revealed. Not about you, but about them. About the gap between where you are moving and where they have been still standing still. Upstaging is the fastest way to redirect the room's attention without doing the work that would actually close the gap. Every exclusion, every surveillance, every redirected moment, someone avoided a reckoning your growth was forcing them toward. That is who benefits from the jealousy continuing. And your growth is the ultimate leverage take back. But here's the part that's harder to sit with. Because if growth is the take back, what was handing the leverage over in the first place? You were, not on purpose, not knowingly, but you were maintaining the open border the whole time. For a long time, you didn't realize you were inside a dynamic where open access was benefiting other people more than it was benefiting you. Every time you explained the direction to someone who had already shown you they were not listening to support it, you leaked power through the border yourself. Every time you adjusted the move because their reaction still held authority over your movement, you drained leverage from the checkpoint. Every time you softened the wind before anyone else could redirect it, you redirected your own power before anyone else got the chance to. At work, you remember what happened the last time you announced a move before you made it. They questioned the direction, tried to talk you out of it, planted doubt before the thing had a chance to exist. So when the exclusion comes now, they're not wrong that something changed. What changed is you stopped giving them early access to movement that carried your leverage. Because announcing the move before it's protected is how the move gets managed by people who were never meant to approve it. In the relationship, you used to bring the vision forward, the idea, the direction, the thing you wanted to build. And instead of support, you got doubt dressed up like concern. I don't think that's a good idea. Do you really have time for that? Are you sure that's the right move? And because their opinion still held authority inside your decision-making process, you adjusted. The idea stayed an idea, the move stayed in your head, the direction got postponed before it ever became real. So now when you stop sharing everything, when the move gets built without the preview, that is not secrecy, that is a checkpoint. Because you finally understand your moves were not safe in the hands of someone who kept reducing them before they could take shape. In the inner circle, you learned to minimize the win before the room could do it for you. Say it casually, move past it quickly, make it sound smaller so nobody had to sit with how much it actually meant. But every time you softened it, you redirected your own moment before anyone else had the chance to. You kept leaking power by making your growth easier to walk through without resistance. You thought you were being humble. You thought you were being understanding. You thought explanation would protect the relationship without costing you leverage. But what you were actually doing was leaving your power, your leverage, and your authority unprotected at the border. And a checkpoint that never protects your leverage is not really a checkpoint. It's just an open border where your power stays accessible. But here's what happens when you finally close it. And you need to hear this before it does. Because when it happens, it's going to feel like you did something wrong. The first thing you're going to feel when you close the border is isolation. Because you've always moved with people around you, always included them in the process, always kept the access open. So when you stop, when the move gets made in silence, and you don't loop anyone in, it can feel lonely, like you cut something off that used to feel like connection. But here's what that loneliness actually is. It's the first time you move without waiting for permission to feel ready. Stay there, because on the other side of that isolation, it's the specific clarity of a woman who finally stopped letting other people's access determine the pace of her growth. The dynamic will not respond with acknowledgement. At work, the exclusion deepens. The giggles and inside jokes don't include you anymore. Lunch being ordered no longer makes rounds to you. Side eyes in the hallway like you did something wrong. They're not punishing you for doing well. They're punishing you for doing it without asking for their permission first. In the relationship, their surveillance intensifies. On the surface, they appear unfazed and unbothered, like they could care less with what you're building. But behind the scenes, they are stalking you like a hawk, checking your socials, turning down volume controls to eavesdrops on calls. That isn't curiosity. That is someone trying to get back inside a border you stopped leaving open. In the inner circle, you will notice distance. You will start seeing outings pop up online that don't include you. You will see the invite slow down. What once looked like being included now looks like seclusion. What once looked like being one of them now looks like being contained. And this is the part that matters most, because they will try to make your checkpoint feel like a character flaw. They'll make you feel like you betrayed them, that moving in silence is wrong, that being accessible is an obligation. And if you're not careful, you'll start to audit yourself, wonder if closing the border made you something you don't want to be. Their discomfort with the checkpoint is not evidence the checkpoint is wrong. That isn't you switching up. That is a woman finally protecting what it took courage to build. When an intelligent woman handles jealousy, she doesn't start with matching energy. And it doesn't start with pulling back either. It starts with staying the course, with the same composure and the same class you've always carried, while also refusing to let their response to your growth become your problem to manage. At work, show up, do the work, conduct yourself with the same professionalism you always have. Kill them with kindness, but don't perform extra to try to get back into the circle that closed when you made moves without them. The project is the statement. The results are the response. You let the work speak in the rooms they can't access, and let them sit with their own discomfort at the same lunch table they refuse to level up from. In the relationship, stay neutral. Match that same unbothered and unfazed energy. Stay composed. You don't have to confront the snooping. You don't have to acknowledge it. Stay focused on the direction. Keep building. Lock in on the vision. Refrain from sharing updates. Not as punishment, but with the understanding that you learned through pattern recognition that your movement is safest when it stays protected and out of reach for spectating. In the inner circle, stop minimizing your wins before the room can do it for you. From here out, own it. Let it land fully, without pre-managing how it makes anyone feel. You receive the celebration from the ones who offer it genuinely. And when the upstage comes, stay warm, but bring the focus back to your moment. You make it clear. Actually, I want to finish sharing this. That one sentence is not confrontation. That is authority. The specific authority of a woman who understands that her moment has value and refuses to let someone else's discomfort with her growth determine how much space it gets to take up. And if that awareness makes people pull back, invite you less, or go quiet, that is the dynamic revealing its terms. That is not your problem to manage. None of this requires you to act out of character. None of this requires a confrontation. This is what it looks like when you stop leaking power through a border that was supposed to protect your leverage in the first place. And your growth for the first time gets to move at the pace it was always capable of, without interference. And that interference is the part that got overlooked. Because the interference was the jealousy the entire time. Every dismissal, every redirect, every person who questioned the direction instead of supporting it wasn't reacting to your failure, they were reacting to your potential. This kind of jealousy isn't about envy or hate. It's a power signal. Every exclusion tells you the move you made without them created a gap they can't close. Every surveillance tells you your silence became more valuable than your updates. Every upstage moment tells you your win was significant enough that someone needed to contain it. They weren't responding to you. They were responding to the chat point, to the fact that a woman who used to move without borders started building in silence, started moving without approval, started protecting what was hers, and the growth that triggered all of it, the courage, the audacity, the decision to move without seeking a single person's approval, that is not the problem. That is the proof that something worth protecting finally exists. And the most powerful thing an intelligent woman can understand about jealousy when she's leveling up is that she doesn't have to handle it at all. She just has to maintain the check point and let the growth do what jealousy never could. Speak for itself. Now you have a choice. You can keep responding to the jealousy the way you always have, explaining your movements, minimizing your vision, softening the wind, leaking power through the border so nobody has to acknowledge that the checkpoint exists, while the people who benefited from your open borders keep accessing what was never meant to be free. That keeps your growth at the pace they're comfortable with, and it keeps your authority available to anyone who wants to question it. Or you can recognize what the jealousy is actually telling you, that the courage to move without permission created something worth protecting, that the silence they're trying to surveil is the most powerful thing you've ever built, that the checkpoint that they're angry about is not a wall you built against them, it is a border you built for yourself, and you protect it, not by fighting the people at the gate, but by being unbothered by the ones who can't get through it. One keeps the border open, the other makes you untouchable. Quietly, cleanly, permanently. This channel is for women who are done explaining their growth to people who were only comfortable when the borders were open. If you're ready to understand the power dynamic behind why your courage activates jealousy and what it actually means to protect your authority without losing it, subscribe, because on this channel, we break down how power, leverage, and authority actually move in real life.